And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Ango Show. It's February 26, 2025. And if you're looking, Billy looks a little bit different today.
I'm not Billy.
I fired his ass. I got rid of him. I threw him
Got
out.
rid of him.
I got rid of Billy. This is his new replacement. I'm kidding. Billy is currently out. I don't know what the is going on. I got sick for like 2.5 weeks. Now Billy just got hit with the fever. So hopefully Billy is all good and getting rested and heals up soon. But we keep the show going. My voice still isn't 100% back, but it's not a big deal. We got Phil finally joining us. Phil, welcome to the Ango Show.
Thank you, bro. I hope it's actually not this show. I hope you guys better not bring whatever you guys got in Michigan over here in CT, because right now I'm feeling good. I'm ready to go. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity to do this. I see the chat is going wild. Thank you guys so much for all the love. Billy, I see you in there, bro. Get better, bro. Just messaged you, honestly, a few minutes ago. So stay safe. God bless and get better soon. But Ango, this has been a long time coming. You and I have been, acquaintances on Twitter and, going back and forth and everything like that. And it's finally time to do this. I'm just ready for the opportunity and I just cannot wait to get into this. But guys, we're here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get right into it.
We do. Last night was NXT. Just a quick note. They were at the same venue that AEW was at a couple weeks ago. Andrew J. Brady Center in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Just a phenomenal venue with AEW when they went there and then NXT going there. Just a beautiful venue. And that was something I immediately noticed when watching AEW and then obviously with NXT. But last night's NXT was just a banger of an episode. Like, honestly, I don't know what they be cooking up. Like, I don't know what these meetings are looking like. I don't know where Shawn Michaels is getting this from, but holy shit, WWE NXT delivered on a really good episode, in my opinion. We're going to talk about it. If you guys want to support the channel, if you guys want to support the show, best way to do that, completely free. Click like. If you guys want your questions or comments read on the stream, all you got to simply do is drop a super chat. We got our super chat goal active. And, listen, Phil, I'm going to be real honest with you. I almost called you Billy, by the way. That's crazy. It's just like
I heard that
repetitiveness, right?
It's all right.
But Phil, I want to talk about NXT.
Yep.
But we do things a little bit different here. We really don't want to go promo by promo, match by match, segment by segment. I want to start the dialogue with clearly a very big talking point, and it's part of the title. AEW fumbled Ricky Starks. Now, the crowd at NXT last night agrees, but I really agree. So I want to know where your reaction is. You see Ricky Saints, he's got the new music, the new packaging. He goes out there and has a great match. What's your overall thoughts and opinions when you see Ricky Starks becoming Ricky Saints in NXT?
So I want to take it back to when the first initial thing started where the name change happened at that contract signing. When that contract signing happened, we saw the camera pan down to Ricky Saints instead of Ricky Starks. I, first of all, didn't even mind the name change. I didn't. I thought the name change actually kind of rolled off the tongue a little bit more than what we got previously. And, I was thinking, as long as they don't change up his presentation, the way he talks, the way he goes about things and his moves, I'm perfectly fine with what they're doing with him right now because he's in a new place. He's not sitting on the sidelines anymore. And at the end of the day, he's here in NXT. He came here to do what he wanted to do. And now we see the presentation. We see what he's doing here. And I thought it was absolutely perfectly well done last night, truthfully, with how the music came into play, with the whole Ricky pose and the spotlight and all that, and his moves and just the way he goes about himself. Tony fumbled? Hell yeah, he did. Because you just see the amount of star power that this guy has. You see the fanfare that this guy has. I had two individuals that were actually there live last night for NXT. And not only did they say that this arena is going to be absolutely fantastic for what NXT brings to the table, but they're huge Ricky Starks fans as well. So they were just really looking forward to what Ricky Starks and Ricky Saints was going to be. I'm still probably going to be calling him Ricky Starks for this entire time, but
Oh,
don't mind me. Um, I think what they're already doing with Ricky Saints, Ricky Starks, whatever you're going to be calling him, has been absolutely fantastic so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what his, trajectory for NXT is going to be for the next few months or however long he is going to be there. I think Ricky Starks is on honestly really going to be something for WWE. It's just a matter of time before he actually tries to, get to where he wants to be. And that is ultimately on top where he really should relatively belong with
yeah.
NXT.
It's interesting when you look at Ricky in NXT, and I've said this for a very long time. I think Def Rebel more oftentimes than not just gets the entrance music wrong.
Yeah.
And his entrance music last night, it felt familiar, but felt better. I don't know how to explain it. Like it felt like Ricky Starks, but just slightly altered, right? And then obviously they do the spotlight on him. He hits his pose. He goes and has this really great match. Obviously picks up the win. He celebrates. But the thing that people aren't talking about is that digital exclusive where he was interviewed after and he's speaking very emotionally from the heart. Did you watch that video?
I did not actually see that video. I heard about it from a friend. I just haven't checked it out today because I was just getting ready to do this. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I encourage everybody to watch it. You can tell the passion is in there. You can tell this guy is exactly where he's meant to be. And the thing that's very interesting is that when I saw Ricky Starks last night, or Ricky Saints, and it will take some time, obviously, to get used to the name change.
right.
But when I saw him last night, this is where I really question AEW, because WWE has found, whether the chat wants to admit this, whether the viewers want to admit this, whatever it may be, WWE has found that they can take AEW people, bring them in immediately to WWE programming, and find something for them. The same can't be said consistently for WWE talent who have left the company and have gone to AEW. So when we
That's fair.
hear the crowd chant Tony fumbled, well, there's a very big part of me that agrees with that, right? But then I started thinking, because obviously I see the chat, I see some responses on Twitter, because of course the IWC, when you leave AEW and go to WWE, the IWC hates you. They loved Ricky back then when he was on TV. Now they hate him. But there's a huge difference. And there's a huge difference in the way WWE and AEW does something. And I kind of want to explain it. And then you could kind of give me your reaction.
Okay.
When Ricochet left WWE and went to AEW, I said this flat out. I said, it's a lateral move. For Ricochet to leave WWE, we cannot sit there and act like WWE didn't utilize Ricochet. We can't act like they didn't put him in some big matches. We can't act like they didn't put him in storylines. We can't act like WWE didn't put titles around his waist, because they did. Ricochet goes to AEW, and I say it's a lateral move, because ultimately at the end of the day, Ricochet has already hit his ceiling. He's doing some cool stuff with the character, but we're not going to sit there and act like Ricochet wasn't utilized in WWE. You can argue maybe you like his character more in AEW, but we can't sit there and say WWE fumbled Ricochet. What we could do is argue, and I think there's a very healthy argument that could be made, WWE completely dropped the ball on Swerve Strickland. AEW, at the time when they brought in Swerve Strickland, did not do a good job with Swerve Strickland. They were doing the whole thing with Swerve and Keith Lee, And then they did that faction where Parker Boudreaux and the other guy, both very green. It was not good stuff. But they found a way to elevate Swerve to a world championship reign as a top guy. That right there cemented the ideology that WWE fumbled Swerve, right? WWE didn't fumble Ricochet, but they fumbled Swerve. You can argue that AEW fumbled Andrade and Miro, Malachi Black, right? Those are all arguments. Now I watch NXT and I see Ricky Starks. 2 weeks in a row, it is very clear that they have a plan for him. It is very clear that they plan on using him. And it is also very clear that he won't be in NXT much longer.
Yeah.
It's very clear. So I see this and I see this ideology from people in the chat and they say, what do you mean AEW fumbled Ricky Starks? And I don't know how else to explain this other than the fact that Ricky Starks coming into WWE isn't something where WWE literally has to like change everything about him. He's the same Ricky Starks with just a different last name.
Right.
They're putting him on TV. They put him in the storyline. They're utilizing him. So for me to say that AEW fumbled Tony Khan fumbled Ricky Starks, it's very simple. They pulled him off TV. They had this.
Right.
They decided not to utilize him. So I don't know if maybe my analysis is correct. You can tell me what you think. But when I see Ricochet and then I see the Swerve situation and I see the way certain talent get utilized, I'm very comfortable with saying Tony Khan fumbled him. And 100% they dropped the ball.
Well, I know we're probably going to get into some other topics that we possibly do not agree on, but everything here made 100% sense with me. With the whole Ricochet thing, Ricochet, you're right. We can't say that WWE didn't put him in prominent positions to succeed. We can't say that we haven't seen that from him in the past, but the AEW move being lateral, as you say, I really didn't want it to turn out that way, mainly because even though there are a ton of quote unquote ricochets in AEW with the high flying maneuvers and all that kind of stuff, I really wanted Ricochet to just say, all right, WWE wasn't for me at the time. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna figure out my own situation, come to AEW and really just try to make a name for myself here. Then, when I was just thinking about it, I talk with a lot of guys I do an AEW post show, and they're like, Phil, I don't know what you're trying to see right now, but in WWE, there was a reason why he was known as the one and only. Because really, realistically, not a lot of people were doing what Ricochet was doing back in WWE, and that's why they did the whole one and only thing in his entrance and all that kind of stuff. Now, here's him in AEW, and we're trying to figure out, like, all right, what is he going to be doing here? He's done this whole heel turn. He's done this new role for himself, which is, neither here or there. You can like it, you can not like it, what have you, but things are happening right now, and we're trying to figure this out with Ricochet, not Ricochet, not wow. Okay, Phil, calm down. With Ricky Starks, you had him in the palm of your hands. He wanted to be utilized. He wanted to work. He wanted to do so many more things in AEW. AEW just didn't put him on TV. And we're like, where is Ricky? Where is Ricky? What's happening with Ricky? He's like, I'm right here, guys. I'm just not being utilized. So I completely understand where you're coming from in all the aspects that you mentioned. I just wish that Tony Khan knew what he had, because now that he doesn't know what he had in Ricky Starks, we have him here in NXT. He was prominently well used in a tag team match, which was a great first match for him to be in. And the presentation, along with really anything else, never really changed about the man. Just the last name.
So there was this comment in the chat. So why can you say AEW fumbled Ricky Saints if you can't say WWE fumbled Ricochet? They were used the same in each company. If you hate AEW, just say I hate AEW. So this is obviously clearly factually wrong, right? They were not used the same in each company. That That's not true. Ricochet was used consistently on WWE programming. Ricochet had title reigns in WWE programming. So when you look at AEW and you look at Ricky Starks, okay, you could bring up the FTW championship. That obviously doesn't fucking matter, and it will never matter, and it's never mattered.
It's retired
But
now.
there was a time period where Ricky Starks was utilized and they completely took him off TV, which, by the way, this was a guy who was completely over. This wasn't a guy who was struggling to get over. This was a guy who got over. WWE didn't fumble Ricochet because they actually used the guy. Ricochet, you can argue from a WWE standpoint that he was never strong enough on the mic. Okay, AEW is showing that with this character, he's relatively good on the mic. It's not as bad, right?
Yeah.
So there's this whole thing where, and I love this apples to apples comparisons. This is what I love. I love when there's apples to apples. When people are saying, well, why do you think Tony fumbled Ricky? Guys, Ricky stood toe to toe with Bryan Danielson and Adam Copeland, and he literally buried the shit out of Adam Copeland on the mic and then was never seen again on TV.
And to me, I felt like that was kind of personal. I really did. Not only when it came down to what Ricky said to Cope, but I when we never saw Ricky on AEW programming after that, I'm like, all right, something had to have happened there. Because not only do we just not see Ricky for the remainder of his time there after that promo, but it's a lot different from what AEW does in terms of like an actual stance for their promo style instead of what WWE does. WWE, allows these people to talk, but there's bullet points they got to go through, and they got to, put these points in their promos to make sure they got to do what they got to do with the story. AEW, from what I understand, they're trying like you can say whatever you want out there basically, and you're honestly not going to have any repercussions, which is why he did what he did with Edge. I don't know what happened there, but something went down.
Yeah.
And that's why he's not there anymore in AEW.
So it's interesting because I saw this in the chat. AEW didn't utilize Ricky Starks as just an outright lie. He was a tag champ and he won the Owen Hart tournament, beating CM Punk in the finals. He also had that brilliant match at All Out. So it's interesting, right? Because these things did happen. So you're telling me that Tony Khan wasted all of that for what reason? Was it because Ricky was backstage with Cody at Royal Rumble? Was it because the thing that's often talked about on the internet, which is funny, is that Ricky was outright denying creative plans. That's what everybody loves to say in the IWC. Malachi, Miro, there's been no proof of that. There's been no such thing as that.
Unless you were in that boardroom where there were creative plans going down between Tony and Ricky, you don't know that for sure. I'm sorry, you just don't.
Isn't. There is nothing that suggests that's true. But I have noticed, Phil, that when people leave AEW for WWE, and these people were well liked in AEW beforehand, they immediately get diminished and devalued. And so I think the issue here is that when you see people make this argument, like I am, where I say AEW fumbled him, we all know this guy's potential. We all know what this guy could be. We know that because of things like this comment where we saw AEW do some cool stuff with him. My argument, though, and this has been proven time and time again, it offends everybody. So I'm glad I keep saying it because I want this to offend everybody until a fucking change is made. But AEW has a very big problem. When talent get over, they don't know how to connect and capitalize right after. They don't. Time and time again. Time and time again. We saw Harley Cameron get over, and then she lost that Grand Slam. Now she's just back to square one. This
I,
is a huge problem in AEW.
yeah, no, I completely see that. The whole Harley Cameron thing, I feel like they're about to do it again with Harley because we see everything that's happening with her. You saw the amount of meteoric rise that she had for the TBS championship. She does this thing with Mercedes. I really wanted that match to go well, and it did. I'm not saying that it didn't, but now that she lost this match against Mercedes Monet, I just don't know where AEW is going to go with her now after everything was all said and done because you had everything in the palm of your hands to make a moment happen in Australia for that TBS championship. And though I do believe that the chase for Harley Cameron is the way to go, I just don't trust in AEW to really just kind of make that, switch for her to get her to continuously get more wins, to get back to the TBS championship, to get back to Mercedes Monet. And I don't think that's a problem for me. I think that's a problem for AEW when it comes down to you have people in the palm of your hands that are in prominent roles that are organically getting over. And then when you don't capitalize on them, the fans are like, "Well, what the hell are you doing, AEW? This is not the way to go. You had something there. Why didn't you just capitalize on it?" I don't think that's something to do with me. I just think that has something to do with the creative booking and the way things go over there. But I hope AEW knows what they have in Harley because if they don't, people are just gonna cause a shitstorm online, just like they did with Wardlow or anybody else that had organically gone
Oh,
over and they
but
didn't
the
get
thing that's going to end
utilized.
up happening is if Harley Cameron were to leave the company and go to WWE, for example, it's going to be Harley Cameron wasn't good.
Exactly.
That's the problem, and
Exactly.
that's hypothetical. I don't think she leaves AEW, but we have seen time and time
No.
again that this is a repetitive thing, not only within the internet but also within AEW programming. What I find fascinating too is like obviously we have to wait and see what WWE does with Ricky Starks, but how WWE utilizes Ricky isn't really whether or not AEW fumbled or didn't fumble, right? Like when you look at AEW, for example, and what they had with Ricky, we are talking about a guy who organically got over. Now, I don't know about you, Phil, but I remember watching Ricky Starks in NWA. And so I
Yep.
remember seeing Ricky Starks being like, oh, this guy is perfect for WWE. He fits the mold. AEW comes around. Cody ends up bringing him in, does some really cool stuff, gets all the way to the point where Tony Khan just stops utilizing him. The argument now becomes whether or not Tony Khan ever truly knows what he has on his roster until it's gone. And I can argue that Tony Khan has failed with that. By the way, I can argue that WWE has the same exact issue. 100%. The problem is with WWE, they are the end all be all. So if you don't make it in WWE and you go somewhere else, how often does that person end up coming back to WWE? It's not very often. Very few
Yeah.
guys have been fired and then came back and became successful. Drew McIntyre is the perfect example. I think you can add LA Knight because people forget about him in NXT back in like 2012, 2013 or whatever it was before he was LA Knight.
Right.
You know, like there are a few instances where some guys have been able to leave and come back and be successful. But there has been a lot of situations where if you leave WWE and go to AEW, it doesn't change the fact that WWE was the end all be all. So for example, right? Um, let me give you Cedric Alexander for an example. Went to
Okay.
WWE,
Okay.
did some great stuff as part of 205 Live, obviously did the Hurt Business. At a moment in time, he was actually utilized and was really good, right? Then for some reason, they just never figured out what to do with him. If he goes to AEW and joins the Hurt Syndicate, that doesn't mean anything because we've seen that before, right? But if he goes to AEW, doesn't join the Hurt Syndicate, becomes one of the top guys on the roster, goes for the world title, and wins the world title, then it's safe to say that he didn't flourish under WWE and he can never flourish under WWE. WWE didn't know what they have with him. But if Cedric Alexander goes to the Hurt Syndicate, or just goes and becomes a tag team guy, or he goes and has some singles matches for the International Championship or TNT Championship, it's not really that much different than what we saw with him. You know what I'm saying? But if Cedric Alexander left WWE, went to AEW, completely changed the game, basically pulled a Drew McIntyre, it's very safe to say that WWE dropped the ball. So now, as I watch NXT and I see Ricky Starks and the way he's presented and everything, and I see that he's got Ricky Saints and all this stuff, to me, what I'm realizing, and this is what I'm the most curious about from your perspective, but when you see Ricky Starks go into NXT in 2 weeks and it's already like well known that they are behind this guy, you have to wonder, what is Tony Khan's actual reaction? And that's the thing to me that I find the most fascinating, because it's not like we're talking about a guy who left AEW and went to WWE and did nothing or is doing nothing. It is very, very clear they got something there. So if you're Tony Khan, how do you react to it? And that's the thing I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how he would react. I mean, obviously, he would probably, I would hope that Tony Khan kind of knew where all of this was going. It was kind of telegraphed from the very beginning that Ricky just was not satisfied. Ricky wanted to do something. Like he wanted to work. He wanted to actually be out there in front of the crowd because he feels like he has something to bring to the table, and he absolutely does. But now, with everything with the reactions online and what Tony Khan is thinking, and how everything's really going to go about this entire situation, I don't know what Tony Khan is really thinking. I don't know what really happened with all this, but he sees Ricky, and then all of a sudden he does what he does on that, I believe, Monday morning, whenever that happened, with the 3 releases that AEW did with Malachi, Alistair, Rusev, Miro, and what the hell?
You're right. It was Miro, Malachi, and Ricky.
Oh, it was Ricky. Yeah, so he was a part of the 3. So yeah, I mean, you see all of this happening. And, I applauded Tony for doing something like that, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to be utilizing these talents, then why should they be either A, on your payroll, or B, just, sitting there on the sidelines? I just want something for all 3 of those guys, and hopefully that does come to fruition. But for Tony Khan, I don't know what's going to happen with him. I feel like this is not the end of stuff like this happening. We all know what's happening with the Ray Phoenix situation, but I mean, that's neither here or there. We're all just trying to figure out what's happening with that. But Tony Khan's gonna have to figure something else out, because this is not gonna be over. And I feel like that's just gonna be something inevitable unless he tries to figure it out.
What I think is so crazy is, because you said you don't know how Tony Khan would react, right? But what I find really crazy is I think Tony Khan knew deep down inside this is another circumstance where somebody's going to go to WWE and just look really good.
Yeah.
I think it is very obvious WWE has a track record. There hasn't been one person from AEW that went to WWE that has been butchered. Ethan Page,
great.
Ethan Page was hot-shotted. Obviously, we saw exactly what happened with Jade. She had the red carpet treatment. Lexis King was a shocker for many, because he got the vignettes.
Myself included.
Yeah, like it was, crazy. Sean Spears gets used on TV. His role is mainly a backstage role, but he's got this whole thing with Nico Vance and Izzy Dame and the Buchanan, Brooks Jensen. Right. So like, I think Tony Khan is very well aware that people leave his company and go. They are very well aware that they leave AEW and go to WWE, and they're going to be utilized. I think for a lot of people in WWE, the proof that there's no confidence in AEW, honestly, I think it's guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who have they had many reasons to go to AEW and a very big possibility of getting paid well over there, and they have committed to WWE. So I think there's a lot of proof that a lot of people in WWE initially saw like AEW as like the cool thing, right? And that's where everybody who got released, they ended up going there. Then I think they looked and they were like, oh, they didn't do anything with Keith Lee. They're struggling with Adam Cole. They struggle with the Undisputed Kingdom. Okay, they struggled with Andrade and Miro and Malachi. Okay, well, some of these other talents in AEW who are homegrown talent are also now not really being booked well. So I think there is a difference. I think Tony Khan and AEW, I think they're very well aware that under the Triple H and Shawn Michaels leadership, you could jump over and you'll be taken seriously. And I think it's inevitable. Obviously, we will see how things change, but or how things develop as time goes on. The last few weeks for AEW television has been really good. Now, apparently, Tony Khan's in the weeds. He's the one who's doing more creative involvement. If that's the case, then that will obviously change the way people perceive AEW. I feel like their last few episodes have been relatively good. Because of that, it makes me excited for tonight's episode. But they don't have a good track record of bringing in WWE talent. And I think WWE has a good track record of bringing in AEW talent, especially for a company who historically, like, especially under Vince, I mean, how many people said it about Cody? They're going to bury Cody. They literally said that Cody was not finishing the story at WrestleMania 39 because they wanted to fucking bury him because of the way things were. And now look at Cody. He's the biggest star in the company, right?
Right. With everything that was happening with that whole entire situation, I didn't know how WWE was going to go with the whole Cody situation. That entire situation was crazy. But the one thing that I've really applauded WWE on when it came down to these former AEW guys coming over to WWE is that relatively nothing has changed about their presentation. They see what they have in these guys, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we see what you did here, but why don't we take what you did there, turn it up to 100, and make something worth out of it?
Yeah.
The American Nightmare stuff, they did nothing but completely, continuously get that over, and now the woe is absolutely insane in every building that you get into. Ethan Page, all ego is, he was absolutely fantastic as soon as he stepped foot in NXT, and he just got skyrocketed to the moon. Like you said, Jade Cargill, no presentation about her was changed. They laid out the red carpet. They did absolutely everything for her. Lexis King, I had no idea what Lexis King was going to be in NXT, but he continuously shocked me in every single way imaginable because, yeah, sure, they changed up his stuff, but they changed it for the better.
Yeah.
And now Shawn Spears, he's doing this backstage stuff right now, but he's in the weeds. He's doing his thing in NXT, and Shawn Spears came back as Shawn Spears, not Ty Dillinger, Shawn Spears.
He came back with the chairman gimmick too.
Yes. So, I mean, they're doing stuff with these guys. They're not changing up their names, well, relatively to Lexis King, but I mean, they're not really doing anything in terms of the presentation. They're just turning it up to 100 and say, all right, we have the ball now. Let's run with this. Let's go.
Yeah. Which it's funny, like Lexis King and Moose having that match.
Would have never thought that happened. Would have never thought in a million years.
But it was a great match.
But it was a good match.
Yeah.
It was a good match.
It's cool. The thing is, Brian Pillman Jr. always was like, especially watching him in MLW as well. I was like, man, I like this kid. Like, I like him. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do with him, especially being a Pillman Jr. When he goes to AEW, I was like, man, I like this guy. And it was crazy because there was certain moments where it was like, okay, AEW has a chance to do something special with this kid. Just get behind him a little bit, develop him a little bit, right? They don't have a system for that. So when he ends up going to WWE, They don't want to do the Brian Pillman Jr. thing. Totally fair.
Which is fine. Yeah.
Give him his own identity, comes up with the name. I remember thinking, Lexus King really isn't that bad of a name. I think he'll catch on. But let's see what he actually does. Okay, he leans into the heel character, gets the painted beard and goes really crazy at the barber shop. And the thing is, now he's actually like doing stuff on TV consistently. So it is very interesting watching that progression. And really, I think what it comes down to, where like the IWC will really hate when I say this, but WWE having that performance center and AEW not is a true testament to the true differences between the companies, because WWE, they don't have to develop Ricky Starks, right? Ricky's had it since NWA. He had it in NWA. He had it in AEW. AEW chose not to expand and elevate him further. WWE now, having the performance center, they can collaborate with him and say, we like what you've done in the past. How can we make this more elevated? So when you look at WWE, they have a chance to utilize that performance center and all these coaches and say, these are your strengths. Let's build upon it. Whereas somebody goes into AEW, and I feel like you kind of have to float for a little bit until you figure it out. And I think that's a really big thing. And Tolino Channel dropped a super chat, but this is a perfect example. Where is Camille and Deonna Purrazzo? Yeah. We saw Deonna Purrazzo completely, WWE dropped the ball with her. They didn't know what to do with her. Vince McMahon and Triple H, it didn't matter which one it was. They both did not know what to do with her. NXT didn't know what to do with her. We saw what she could do in ROH back in the day. So when she goes to TNA and becomes the top knockout over there and kills it over there and does amazing stuff over there, and then you see that she's going to AEW, you're like, cool, this is great. Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't know how to develop. They don't know how to expand. Now, the question is, do they not know how, or do they just choose not to? Because, you know, there's a real life connection between Deonna Purrazzo, Britt Baker, and Taya Valkyrie. That's historically well known. Very good friends. You're telling me you couldn't do something with all three of them together?
Right. And the thing is, Tolino, Deonna's on tonight. She's on tonight's episode of Dynamite. And I mean, I've seen her over the course of the last couple of weeks being on episodes of Collision and doing this stuff with, you know, Taya and all that stuff. But I mean, when I'll say this right now, when Deonna left TNA to come to AEW, I was honestly really shocked. I was. But with everything that was happening, I'm like, AEW, if Deonna is taking the chance to come over here to AEW, put the machine behind her. When you have the machine behind you, it's absolutely everything. And that's what that's what WWE is when it comes down to the PC and what they have over there. We see your strengths, let's build upon them. We see your weaknesses, let's figure out how to make those strengths. Make those your strengths. And that's what the PC is all about. And that's how you get that machine behind you. And when you have that machine behind you, you're off to the races at that point. Camille, I heard she was filming a movie at one point, but I think the production's done. So, I mean, you know, I feel like that's kind of why they write her off to do the movie and everything like that. But now we haven't seen her in months after that. So I have no idea what's going on with her. But I felt like at one point she was honestly kind of the perfect candidate to do something with Mercedes to take that title off her. But now I have no idea what's happening with her. So
I remember thinking, holy shit, Camille goes to NXT. From after NWA, she goes to NXT, and they basically, whether they get Jordan Grace or not, they have their next woman to develop further and turn into a big star. And I remember when she went to AEW, I was like, hey, it's not a bad thing because she's good. You know, they got to utilize her. Yeah. They didn't. One thing I want to point out, because I see Pete Rock says, watch the damn show before you say, where are they? So I think a great example of this, though, and this is the AEW problem. And I can tell you this is an AEW problem. I have had AEW talent tell me this is a problem. So just so I'm very clear and public about this, the last televised match that Deonna Purrazzo had on AEW television was January 25th, 2025, the AEW TBS title 4-way eliminator. She lost to Yuka Sakazaki. That was the match between her, Queen Aminata, Serena Deeb.
Yeah.
That was a 9-minute match. Okay. Before that, January 4th, she lost to Toni Storm when Toni Storm was being the rookie character. Before that, December 11th, 2024, she beat Shaza McKenzie in 1 minute and 24 seconds. Before that, December 4th, on Rampage, her and Taya Valkyrie defeated Ella Elizabeth and Freya States in a tag team match. Before that, November 23rd, she lost to Anna Jay, Full Gear 0 Hour, hometown hero. So the thing is, being on TV is one thing. Being on TV consistently and being part of a program consistently is another thing. So we are not talking about somebody just being put on TV for a segment, right? I'm talking about being put in a prominent role. When you become the top knockout in TNA and Impact for years and you hold it down, and then you go to AEW and that is what you have to show for it, that's called dropping the ball. That's what it is.
And now, yeah. And now here's the thing. Deonna's on tonight's episode against none other than Harley Cameron. She's in this match against Harley, and now we gotta figure out what AEW is going to do. I have no faith in AEW right now to say that Deonna Purrazzo is going to be winning this match, mainly because I don't know what's really happening right now with either A, Harley Cameron, or B, Deonna Purrazzo. I don't know what's really going to be happening when it comes down to that match. I have no idea how the chemistry is going to be working out. I have no idea what these two ladies are even going to be prominently well utilized for. And now we just got to wait until Dynamite. Harley somehow tries to, if Harley somehow gets this victory here over Deonna, and, we're getting this ball rolling for Harley Cameron, I'm okay with that. I want to see Harley Cameron get more utilized, and I want to see her get back to that role of, TBS championship, all that kind of stuff. But Deonna Purrazzo, you just read out some, matches that she's had, tag team matches with Taya, random ass singles matches on like Collision and everything like that. I don't know where things are happening with her. And you can just see where things are going with the trajectory of Deonna Purrazzo. And a lot of people are not happy about it because they want to see Deonna succeed. Anywhere. It doesn't have to be in AEW. Just have her succeed.
There is this huge thing in pro wrestling where obviously no company is just going to be 100% perfect, obviously. But I don't know how anybody looks at that and doesn't think that's like a concern. Like when I see tonight, for example, maybe you have the Vendetta reveal a third member and they attack Harley Cameron. That's the only acceptable thing they can do, because then you could capitalize on Harley Cameron being a big baby face, chasing them down, whatever. However, this is like, if Harley Cameron loses, your argument is you're failing to capitalize on that momentum she had before Grand Slam. If Deonna Purrazzo loses, yes, it's good for Harley Cameron because they're capitalizing on her. But now this is a circumstance in which Deonna Purrazzo, again, looks weak and taking another pinfall loss or whatever. So the thing is, matchmaking in AEW is sometimes so good, but sometimes it is so stupid because both of them really shouldn't be losing. And so what really ends up happening here is that fans are conflicted. You can't get somebody over. When I watched NXT last night, for example, and they announced title versus title for Julia versus Stephanie Vicker, to me, I'm thinking, I love the matchup, but title versus title, brother, I don't want either one of them to drop their titles.
Right.
So immediately I'm thinking in my head, okay, Jordan Grace or somebody has to cause a no contest. Because neither one of them should be losing in this situation.
And I feel like it's way too soon for either of them to drop those titles.
For sure.
Either one of them. And when I saw that match made official, I'm like, this is fantastic. They're really making me want to go to the show right now because it's literally only an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's just inevitable at that point. But you're really trying to make me go to the show. But at the end of the day, what are you going to be doing after the fact? And I think with everything that's happening with these titles and Jordan Grace coming on in, that's your big three
Yeah.
with NXT. Jordan Grace, Julia, Stephanie Van and you can clearly see that that's how they were positioning it. I mean, we saw them three stand shoulder to shoulder together, and we're like, yeah, no, this is. They say this is literally the strongest women's division on the entire planet. That's because it is.
Yeah.
And now we just got to figure out where things are going. I'm very much looking forward to that match, but I just feel like it's way too soon for either of those two to lose at any point for those championships.
Yeah. But it goes back to what I was saying about like you can't just book matches where like, and it's happening in pro wrestling, and I fucking hate it. I hate it. And I hate it when WWE does it, and I hate it when AEW does it. But you're booking matches where really both people should not be losing.
That
You know?
that match right there should happen in NXT. That's not the argument. What's honestly happening right now is that I feel like it is too soon.
And yes, too soon for sure. And then also, like that's for Roadblock. What about Stand and Deliver?
Right.
Like, what's your plan for Stand and Deliver? Right. So like they have to do some sort of no contest bullshit because they need to make everybody feel cheated so that way they buy tickets to Stand and Deliver. But it does get to a point where in pro wrestling it's become a big issue. I constantly hate it. Deonna Purrazzo, Arlie Cameron, just two people that should be racking up wins. I think what I've really learned, and I see this kind of like even with NXT and TNA, it's going to be really interesting. Fraxium versus the Hardys. You know, we had Fraxium show up after the Hardys beat Tavion Heights and Randy Orton Jr. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
so now you're giving us that dream match with Fraxium and the Hardys. TNA tag titles are on the line. How do you do that?
How do you do that? Yeah, and that match is made official, and I'm like, all right, now you're really trying to make me go to the show. But again, it's like you got one of the best tag teams, if not the best tag team going on in WWE right now in Fraxium, who is just absolutely on another level. And I feel like they've been telegraphing this. I know we're not here to talk about that, possible turn or anything like that, but they were telegraphing that stuff for so long for somebody to turn on the other, and it just never happened. They're like, no, we're fine. That they made it into a whole entire gimmick for them saying, no, we're fine. And then they go to TNA. They're doing this stuff with the Hardys, and I'm like, all right, I see where you're going with this. I see the vision that you're trying to do, but how are you going to book the winner? That's the thing. I love this partnership with TNA and WWE. I love this partnership that they have with NXT, but it's like, I feel like this was kind of the thing that's happening here where you're booking these great matches, don't get me wrong. And I feel like with the other match that's happening between TNA and WWE with Oba and Moose, I feel like with the NXT championship being on the line, you can see where things are going with that. I would feel like Oba wouldn't have to, take the loss in that sense. It's kind of telegraphed right there, but you see what's happening right now with these TNA and WWE matches, and though they're absolutely fantastic matches, and we're going to be getting great stuff in the end, booking the finishes and booking the actual winners of these matches, I feel are going to be relatively hard for WWE and TNA to figure out at some
Yeah.
point, because when's enough, essentially, to try to figure out how both these promotions can benefit 50-50.
And the number one thing, and it goes back to what I was saying about the Deanna thing, is you don't want people to just look weak. You don't want people to look weak. That's been the biggest concern that I've seen in professional wrestling, is that you don't want people to look weak. I think AEW, which Tony Khan has publicly spoken about this, where, you know, and Pete brought this up. He says, Ango, you can't push every woman with only 4 hours of TV. Some will have to job. Okay, that's fair. Now let's talk about the women they are pushing. Who is truly being pushed weekly on TV consistently with programs in AEW? Who? Phil, do you have an answer for that?
I'm not really.
Tony
No.
Storm.
Other than that, yeah.
Tony Storm has
Okay.
been the
Yeah, no,
only
that's fair.
the only consistent one. Their own champion was Mariah May. That wasn't relevant. That was a very irrelevant title reign. Shameful title reign. And Mercedes Moné, who is arguably their biggest women's star, is not even in a program going into Revolution with an AEW star.
Yeah.
So Tony Khan's philosophy is completely different. He doesn't believe in jobbers. Tony Khan clearly doesn't believe in jobbers. It is
They
very
do these local
rare.
talents, but that's it. If you really want to talk about that stuff, other than that, there's no real jobbers. You're right.
There isn't. So when the conversation then becomes someone will have to job, okay. So
Why does it have to be a prominent name though? That's the thing. Or take a loss like that.
okay, I hate to say this because I adore her. I think she was such a great improvement from NXT to AEW, but Ty Conti,
Okay.
somebody who, again, I adore her. She was somebody who goes into AEW and like genuinely wanted to get better, and she genuinely got better, right? Obviously, she took time away. She got pregnant. She had a baby, got married, all these things with Sammy Guevara. Okay, cool. Nothing against that. But if you need jobbers, you can make her a jobber for a little bit. It's not like she was a top star in NXT. You know what I mean? It's not like Deanna Purrazzo shouldn't be jobbing. Deanna Purrazzo was a top star in the company she was from. Camille was a top star in the company that she was from. Camille had a very, very, very lengthy title reign. So the conversation doesn't become Ango wants to push several women at once. What Ango wants to see is the people actually push consistently. Because if you go and look at Mercedes Moné, right? What is her? Okay, she had the feud with Harley Cameron. What was the feud before that? And what was the feud before that? And what was the program before that? The thing is, they have a very weird way of building programs long term for the women. There's a reason why, and maybe you've heard me say this or not, I don't know. But like I've said, you can make a very, very strong argument for Swerve and Hangman Page being feud of the year in professional wrestling.
That's very fair to say. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the number one feud. I'm saying you can make that argument, and a very strong argument, because it was very good, very detailed. Every single week there was continuity to it. It was a major program.
And I don't think it's over. Like, that's the thing. They're going to continue to build on that.
And the development from Hangman Page from then to now he's feuding with MJF, there's still elements from that character that have crossed over. So therefore, you get behind it even more. Now, nobody in the chat can tell me, and I know you can't tell me, who are they doing that for the women?
Yeah, it's just
there's only been one
pushing
person.
Things consistently like that. I mean, Tony's
the
only
only one.
Stuff with that, yeah.
Who was Mariah May's feuds after she won the title?
And that's what furiously irritated me the most when it came down to Mariah's title reign. When Mariah won the title, I'm like, all right, you did this entire situation, you did this entire story with Tony and Mariah to get to where she is. Now she's AEW World Champion. You better have an actual plan for her, because now if you don't, they're going to completely drop the ball on this championship run. And they did, until Tony came back. And then when Tony came back, they put her right back into that championship picture. And yeah, sure, the rematch was inevitable. I am not saying that was ever going to be the case. But when they did that whole thing for Australia, I'm like, all right, you're just telegraphing a loss for Mariah to give that championship back to Tony Storm, because Tony Storm is your bread and butter. Toni Storm is the one person that you continuously got behind in your women's division, and she honestly kind of turned into, and I've made this comparison in the past on my show with Cam, but um I've made the comparison in the past of where she's honestly kind of like the John Moxley of AEW for the women's division. If something goes awry, put the title on Tony. And that's exactly what they have done. That's why she's a 4-time AEW women's champion. Other than that, what have you done with women to get them in prominent role? And Pete, you say Queen Aminata is a jobber. When they were prominently utilizing her, I've been ultimately praising Queen Aminata for having the time that she had in AEW programming, giving the minutes that they were for her, getting her in those prominent minutes, and utilizing those minutes to the fullest potential that she had. Now we have no idea where she is and what's happening with her.
Just a quick note. You know where she wasn't a jobber? Ring of Honor. When Queen Aminata performs on Watch Honor Club, she wins. She beat Lady Frost, Rachel Ellering, Allison Kay, Christina Marie, Layla Gray. She was actually on a pretty relatively big win streak on Ring of Honor. Then she comes in and loses in 9 minutes to Toni Storm, and then lost in 9 minutes and 48 seconds to Julia Hart between Dynamite and Collision, both this month. So she loses matches on Dynamite, but on Ring of Honor, she wins matches. So I think there's also a disconnect that people have when they see talent, how they're utilized. Because if you look at the women's division in AEW and compare it to anywhere else, like I will confidently say this, I have no problem. Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, Collision, I think all 4 of those shows absolutely struggle with women's booking. 100%. But if you watch NXT, since Shawn Michaels has ran NXT, there has never been a shortage of women's programs. Literally to the point where their women's mid-card main event scene is fucking stacked. It's to the point where they have feuds within the women's division that's not even for a title.
Yeah. There's a reason why they say that NXT is the best women's division in all professional wrestling. And you have the makeup of Raw, SmackDown, and AEW. In terms of the actual makeup of the rosters themselves, they are pretty well known. You have pretty well known names in there. You have a really strong division for some of them. Like for most of the women in those 2 prominent companies, you have divisions that can thrive. But booking is everything. And that's what NXT has been doing the best.
So Pete Rock says she won matches in ROH to get AEW TV time. Not that hard to figure out. Okay. Thank you for just telling me that her matches that she wins in Ring of Honor actually don't mean shit, because that's exactly what you're telling me. That's exactly the fucking problem. This is the problem. There is a reason on Raw, Lyra Valkyria, great talent, but the reason why Lyra Valkyria will never get to the next step on the main roster is because, historically speaking, WWE reserves that top spot for very limited people, and they put a ceiling on their mid-card on the main roster. This will happen inevitably to many of the women in the Intercontinental Championship and the U.S. Championship women's division. However, on NXT, that's not an issue. NXT is 2 fucking hours long, and over an hour and a half of it is devoted to the fucking women. So I don't care if Queen Aminata is jobbing on Dynamite and winning matches on Ring of Honor. We're not going to fucking act like she's not winning matches on Ring of Honor.
And Pete, Athena versus Mercedes at All In, where Athena goes over. Who is going to beat Athena? We have no idea where, like, Athena's been doing this entire Forever Champion in Ring of Honor right now. I do not see her losing that championship. I want it to be to Billy Starks, but I have no idea what. Ring of Honor television to me doesn't even really mean anything. So I don't really ever know what's happening there. I watch some of the shows that they do for, the big events, but right now, They put Athena in Ring of Honor. They gave her the women's championship, and she's held it forever. Mercedes, you think Mercedes versus Athena is a good thing, and I would absolutely love to see that match. Don't get me wrong, but they're telegraphing Mercedes Moné right now to a point to where she's not losing that championship. I just told a friend last night, they're erasing Jade Cargill's record. No doubt about it. And that's just where we're going with this. So the women's division in WWE, AEW, whatever you have there, you're completely that the women's divisions in companies right now need to be booked better. And don't even get me started on the Intercontinental and the United States Championship divisions in WWE, because you have something there. And ever since that was the first title defense for Lara on Raw, the first one. And you have something with her, and I don't know what the hell they're doing with these divisions.
It's there's something I call it the ladder system, and it's super simple because the ladder system is based solely on momentum. In professional wrestling, because it is scripted, you decide who you're going to give the momentum to, right? So AEW doesn't follow this system at all. AEW's philosophy is different. Fine, that's fair. If AEW doesn't want to follow that. But I can tell you right now, Athena and Mercedes should be a big time matchup, right? However, what have they done to ever climb the ladder between those two, for them to climb the ladder to get to the top point where that match would make sense? Because according to the AEW fans, it doesn't really matter what happens on Ring of Honor. But AEW is trying to tell us it does matter in certain ways. But there's a lack of consistency. So for example, when you watch NXT, the argument is, well, the women's division is only good because the men's division is weak. Well, that is true. But is the men's division weak because of booking, or is it weak because of who they have signed in the division? Well, if you look at NXT, personally speaking, I think it's based on who they have signed. I think it's based on the roster. They have a loaded women's roster. So what do? You go towards your strength of booking them. So when I see AEW and I see that they have a loaded roster, but I don't see the momentum swinging for anybody, men or women, it's hard to get invested. You know who I got invested in? Kyle Fletcher. Why? Because they did a really good job of building momentum for him. But now we're in a situation where they're booking Fletcher and Will Ospreay, and we'll see how it pans out. But they have to have Fletcher win. Fletcher can't be in a situation where he doesn't win, because if Fletcher doesn't win, he needs that massive win to catapult him. If he doesn't get it, you don't get a second chance later, bro. When you derail somebody's momentum, it's over. So, unfortunately, we have seen this in AEW. We saw it with Wardlow. Okay, AEW fails to capitalize on him. Now the conversation becomes, Wardlow's just not good. Wardlow's ass. Wardlow sucks. But that's not how it was, because the crowd, the people paying their money, were behind him. Now, how do I gauge the interest? Well, there was a time period when Wardlow was doing that, and they were building those amazing stories. It's no fucking secret. Ratings were better at the time. The crowd attendance was better at the time. People, pay-per-view buys were better at the time. Now in AEW, you can argue that it's not so hot. It's a cold product. Phil, if AEW develops the best wrestling TV show this week, next week, for the next 10 weeks, and WWE gives us the worst episodes ever, it will never change the fact that people are not invested unless they're paying their money for it. So,
correct.
No matter what, anything, I could sit here and argue subjectively, last week's SmackDown really wasn't that hot. Was it hard for me to watch? No, because it was pretty, with me watching wrestling, being sick, it's something to do, right? But it wasn't a strong episode. But guess what? People are invested in WWE's product. They're still buying tickets to the next SmackDown. They're still doing all of these things.
They're going to tune in week in and week out because
There's a
they love
there's a
professional
ladder
wrestling.
system. There's a
There's levels to
momentum
that.
thing. So people are looking, they're
There's levels
looking
to
at
that.
The Rock and Cody and all these things, and they're like, oh, I gotta tune in. I gotta be there. I can't miss that. That's not happening in AEW programming. It's a really weird thing, but what is subjective doesn't always mean, like, if something is subjective, being good or bad doesn't always translate into the actual numbers and stuff. People forget, even under Vince McMahon in WWE 2019, 2018, 2019, WWE was still selling tickets. They weren't as hot as they were now, but they were still selling tickets. And they were putting out some bad content. So we have learned very quickly that it's subjective, but the reality is, like, the reality is we have gotten to a point in professional wrestling where people are actively paying attention as to who they can invest in, who they could get behind. There's a company that does it very well. So when people hate on Jey Uso, Yeet, I simply say, hate all you want, but you're not louder than those people that are spending $500, $600, $700 on tickets, buying the merchandise, being there. So you can hate Jey Uso all you want, but there's an arena with 13,000 people going crazy for him. Now, is there somebody, let me ask you, is there somebody on the AEW's level right now who is drawing that kind of attention to their company?
Who's drawing the kind of reactions with the eating and the woes and all that kind of stuff? From what I can tell, no. Not really. I mean, you have some people that could possibly get to that point if the machine ever got behind them, I feel, but the yeeting stuff right now is absolutely insane. And yes, you say Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay could be that kind of guy for AEW, and I'm not saying that, Pete, but put these people in these positions to get that kind
So
of reaction.
I can't agree with Ospreay. Ospreay is not putting thousands and thousands and thousands of people in seats.
I mean, he could be that guy for AEW,
He isn't that guy, Phil. He isn't that guy.
Not now.
Will Ospreay, by the way, is my favorite wrestler, for those who don't know. But there is not a person in AEW who draws big attendance or big numbers for the company. It's never, there has not been a singular.
They wanted Mercedes to
hasn't happened. Copeland hasn't. These people are people that I love watching, but they went to AEW, and it goes to show you why booking matters, because people come in, they get the big pop, and that's awesome. Will Ospreay goes out there and has banger matches. He's an incredible talent. He's one of my favorites, but he's not drawing and bringing people into AEW. He's not. He's clearly not. You know what really changed for NXT? Before Julia came in, they were already booking the women strong. So then NXT looked at girls like Jada Parker, Roxanne Perez, Lola Vice. Like, they already had stuff there, right? Then they brought in Julia, Stephanie Vaquer, Zarya, Jordan Grace. So they were already showing the world what they do with women's wrestling. Then they brought in some top hitters. That led to people being like, we're invested, we're going to buy tickets, and we're going to watch. Now they get more viewers.
Right.
And they're getting more momentum, which, by the way, the proof was before those women were there, they were already doing what they were supposed to, so that way they could take advantage of it when those bigger names came in. With AEW, that's never happened prior to a big name coming in. So Mercedes came in, but the women's division was being booked week before. The women's division isn't as strongly booked after. So Mercedes is a big draw, but it takes two to tango. So if you're not building a massive program for her, then you have a situation where people are like, oh, cool, Mercedes is there, but like, what's really happening? And this is not an anti-AEW thing. It's just how AEW works. No. AEW just works in a different way. The problem is, if you want people actually invested in your product, you got to build those big programs with those big names right out the gate. So it worked very well initially when Jon Moxley came into the company, feuded with Jericho, right? It doesn't work with Jon Moxley in 2025 feuding with Copeland.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are big names. That's a big match. You can make that match happen, but there's a difference from what AEW was back in the early days of it to what AEW is like now. The philosophies have changed dramatically. We're trying to figure out where things are going, and right now it's just not in the best space. The yeet reaction and how everything happened with that whole entire situation with Jey Uso and the explosion of the popularity with all of this stuff, and then we see what happens with the Rumble. People are not happy, but they're still yeeting in the arenas. So you see the difference of online and the actual in arena type aspect of where fans lie right now with how reactions are felt, and it's like, I see what you guys are doing in the arena, yet all of a sudden you guys are talking online saying this man doesn't deserve this man doesn't deserve that. How the hell do you even think this man is going to be main eventing a WrestleMania like this? The proof's in the pudding with what they're doing with the reactions in the arenas and how everything is going down right now. Jey Uso has worked his ass off to get to where he is.
Well,
And
yeah.
he got that system behind him, and that's where he is right now. And he's facing Gunther for the world title at WrestleMania.
One thing that people should remember too, because they do forget this aspect, but look at Bronson Reed. Came into WWE, just consistently putting him on TV, right? No massive feuds, but they consistently put him on TV. Then it got to the point where, okay, we're going to start putting him with some of the big guys. They did the stuff with him and Seth and the Tsunamis, right? It clicks.
Yes.
Now fans love it and they react, right? Things don't happen overnight. But when you're assigning a big freaking name into your division and you're not building a program and another big program immediately after, it just doesn't work. So the thing is with WWE, this is where WWE has been really good, better than TNA, better than AEW, is that they will sign somebody, maybe not immediately rush you into something, but they will bring you in and consistently utilize you until the crowd starts to get it, right? And it worked for Bronson Reed on the main roster, and it didn't work for Karrion Kross on the main roster when he came back. A lot of people didn't like the fact that he was hot-shotted against Drew the way it was, right? But they kind of learned and they pivoted, and then what happened with Karrion Kross? He's constantly lingering in the background. Everything he's ever done since being back has played an effect on WWE programming elsewhere. Eventually, he'll get a shot, and the crowd will react to it because for so long they've been conditioned to see his influence across all these stories. Same thing when we were talking about Lexis King. It was like, we're not going to rush him immediately. We're going to put him on TV, and eventually now it clicks to the point where people are like, hey man, like this is really enjoyable. So it's just different philosophies and different ways of doing things. But we're not going to sit here and act like Jey Uso. Like we could talk, sure, maybe Will Ospreay is a better wrestler than Jey Uso. But if we're looking at numbers and we're doing all that, it's obviously very clear that Jey Uso has a bigger influence and more popularity than Will Ospreay. There's factual information to support that. Yeah. So the thing is, when we look at professional wrestling and where it stands, and this is my main takeaway from NXT last night watching the show, is that those kind of episodes is what gets people invested. Those kinds of episodes are the ones where people are like, man, it's just clicking. You know, the last 3 to 4 episodes of AEW, really good stuff. More positives than negatives, right? But you got to do it consistently. You have to do it consistently. So we could sit here and say that fans don't pay to see Jey Uso. They pay to see WWE. Maybe that's true. But Jey Uso is one of the top merchandise sellers. So therefore, people might be paying to see WWE, but they sure as hell want to support him.
There's a reason why he's getting so much support.
And go look at the Outrunners. There was a time period killing it, massive merch sales, but then AEW doesn't utilize it. Why? Why would you not utilize that? These people are paying money to see them, and then you're not utilizing them. So at the end of the day, One company is better at listening to their audience than the other. One company is, we're going to put on the best matches, and that's what you're getting. The other company is, we're going to give you what you want. Simple as that. And this is the part that needs to be said because people don't see it. They don't say it too often, but look at TNA. I'm telling you right now, TNA and Joe Hendry, I love Joe Hendry. Very, very big fan of Joe Hendry. It has not changed the fact that Joe Hendry, currently as it stands, it's going to become, it's not timeless. It will run its course. So TNA needs to be thinking about, okay, who can we have be a very viable person to beat Joe Hendry for the world title? They got to figure that out. Are they building that person right now? That person exists on their roster, but are they truly building towards that person? I don't think they are. So again, you can't do what you want. You got to listen to the crowd. Right now, if you listen to the crowd and what people are invested in with TNA, a lot of people are behind Mike Santana. Right. But how do you do that?
Myself included.
There's a system.
But you get behind him. You have the machine get behind him, and you continuously book him to where he needs to be to get there. And Mike Santana's my guy, man. I absolutely love him. I think he would be an absolute fantastic guy to go through to, do that TNA World Championship. But it's up to TNA to get him there. And they've done some great things with Mike Santana so far. But continuously get behind him, get that machine behind him to get to it, get him where he needs
and I
to
will
be.
say this before we end the stream. I will say this. This is a very big argument. NXT is the perfect example of what happens when you give best of both worlds. Because NXT was always developmental. NXT was always taking the smaller people and turning them into something long-term. NXT Black and Gold 2020 was the worst year I've ever watched. 2019 to 2021, before they went to NXT 2.0, was the worst period of NXT in my life. They signed too many indie guys. It just became wrestling. I was not satisfied with it. But watch NXT. You get your characters. You get your comedy. You get your good wrestling matches. They give you a mix. So we could talk about Jey Uso. The Yeet thing will die at one point, right? But it doesn't matter because they have something in the funnel with NXT where eventually they'll have that next thing coming up on the main roster. And it might be Ricky Saints. It might be Obafemi. Who knows? But they have it in NXT. They have it ready to go because nothing is timeless. Nothing lasts forever. Tony Storm's gimmick will get old at some point. But the good news is if AEW is smart, they look at the bottom of the list and say, who can we prop up to eventually get to that point? Harley Cameron may not be the best wrestler, but she's got the strongest character work and she's multi-talented. So at some point, you got to build that up, right? That's how it works.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will call it a stream. Shout out to Phil. Phil, let everybody know where you are at on social media and YouTube and all that good stuff.
All right, guys. First of all, again, thank you for the opportunity to do this. This was absolutely fun, and I think we did some pretty good business here today. But you guys can follow me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Ouimette_. I have the name right there in the name tag for everything right there, so that you guys can know where everything is. This has been absolutely just such a tremendous time talking pro wrestling with Ango. And the thing is, like I said to Ango before the show even started, this has been a long time coming, people. So I think what we did here was very, very good. I just personally want to say this right here, right now, before we end this stream. I am not a hater of any promotion. I want all professional wrestling to succeed. But right now, when it comes down to what has been happening with, some positions to where things can go within other promotions and just how things would go, you got to call it the way you see it. You got to talk to it. You got to talk to the audience and just allow the audience to really just feel how you feel. And I myself, have always been kind of, the predicator of, doing constructive criticism when it's due. And I just feel like that's what we've done here today. If you guys disagree with anything that I have said or anything Ango said or what have you, that's okay. That's all good and well. At the end of the day, professional wrestling is all about having that discussion. I just want to let everybody know here that, yeah, sure, this was my first time out. I hope I did everything okay. I hope everything justice. And we'll see where things go. But guys, absolutely tremendous stream. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. Follow me on those social media platforms, and you guys can see this ugly mug again anytime you want. So have a good
Yeah,
time.
thank you guys all for showing up. Shout out to Phil. And listen, I think it's so easy when you hear people criticize a thing you love. It's so easy to just call them a hater. However, I just want people to understand there has been hours and hours and hours and hours of pro wrestling every single week. You are going to like what you like. However, the thing that needs to be said and reminded to everybody daily, what you like is subjective. Hopefully, more people are like you and they like what you like and they put their money where their mouth is. Because at the end of the day, business is business, business is money. So, unfortunately, this is how it is in wrestling. You want to know when people are truly invested in something? When they're spending money on something. Could be the coolest thing in the world in your eyes. Unfortunately, there's not 100 billion people watching wrestling. That's not the whole market share. The sample size is much smaller than that. So in your eyes, what you think is cool and good, that's awesome. Glad you should be happy that you watch something and you enjoy it. But it doesn't mean it's going to be successful. I want success in the wrestling industry. I want everybody to be successful. The way I think it's going to be successful is the way I think it's going to be successful. Maybe it's not the right answer. However, if it's not the right answer, I'm looking at one company or a couple other companies and being like, well, they're not really delivering good numbers. They're not delivering great attendance. They're not really getting momentum. They're not putting asses in seats. I think that is a clear indicator that kind of justifies my opinion. So at the end of the day, I can tell you guys right now, AEW still isn't profitable. Great TV deal, still not profitable. They burn a lot of money. Thank God that there's a guy who's passionate enough to say, I'm willing to lose money on it, because I'm not. So hopefully they get to the point where they are profitable. But just doing cool wrestling matches doesn't get you there. That's my point. You got to do something else. You got to find a way to get profitable. Now, why does it matter to me? Because at the end of the day, I cover professional wrestling. It's my job. So I want every company to be professional and profitable and making great money. That's the only time. Why? Because my business is impacted by it.
Right.
The more successful companies there are, the better it is for us content creators.
You got 6 days out of the week to watch professional wrestling. Watch what you want to watch and enjoy what you want to
Exactly.
enjoy. But you got people like us here who, well, for me, I'm up and coming. I'm really just trying to get into the groove of everything here. But for Ango, this is literally his job here. He's got to talk about professional wrestling, and he wants everything to succeed just like I do. But we gotta just call it the way we see it. So hopefully I did my job justice today. And we'll continuously expand upon this if I'm ever so inclined to be joined here once again.
Yeah.
But thank you guys, and Ango, just tremendous stuff, man. I cannot say that enough, and appreciate you having me on.
Shout out to Phil. Make sure you guys subscribe. Check him out. He's everywhere. And for sure, Phil will be back. It'll be very interesting, especially with a 3-man group going back and forth. It should be really fun. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Ango Show, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.